Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Charlie Bonner, and I'm the Communications Director here at Move Texas. Welcome to another iteration of Move University, Social Justice for Social Distancing. I'm so excited to have you all today and hope that everyone is staying safe. I'm really excited for today's conversation about building a new generation of voters across the country with some of our national partners from the Students Learn, Students Vote Coalition. Today we are joined by my good friends, Clarissa Unger, the director of the Students Learn, Students Vote Coalition, and Eddy Zerbe, the program director for the Students Learn, Students Vote Coalition, and plug a Move founder. We're so excited to have you back, Eddy. How are y'all doing today?
Oh man, we're doing good, or I'm doing good. I'm here in Washington, D.C. Everything is, just living that quarantine life.
Living that quarantine life, aren't we
Yeah.
all? Eddy, you're New York based, right?
I am. And so it's definitely interesting. I was able to get out a little bit earlier to get some iced coffee, and it's a beautiful day outside, so I
Your,
cannot
go-
complain.
your government sanctioned iced coffee walk.
Exactly. They can't close that down in New York.
Exactly. I'm giving up when they close down the coffee shops. That is how I draw the line. And I think that we're super excited to have y'all because I think we're going through a lot of things in Texas, but y'all work nationally and can really have a bird's eye view of what the student vote movement is really looking like, especially right now. As campuses are closed, we're ending the end of the semester. So let's just jump right into it. I would love to hear a little bit about each of y'all, how you got involved in this work to begin with, and then of course, just generally about the Students Learn, Students Vote Coalition. Clarissa, if you want to start us off.
Great, I'd be happy to. And thank you again for having us here, Charlie. We're really excited to always talk with you, whether it's through this or anything else, other opportunities that we have. So hi again, I'm Clarissa Unger, the director of the Students Learn Students Vote Coalition. Just to share a little bit about myself and how I got into this work. I've been doing student voter engagement work since I was a student myself. I'm originally from Kansas, went to the University of Kansas, got involved in some presidential campaigns while I was a student there, and really have been doing some form of work of this ever since. I had the opportunity to work for a few years at the bipartisan Robert J. Dole Institute of Politics at the University of Kansas, where I had more of an administrator view of this work, and quite frankly got a little frustrated just seeing how many different systems and processes that universities have at their disposal that they could be putting to use to engaging students as voters and inviting them into our democratic process. And so following that, had the opportunity to help start the Students Learn Students Vote Coalition, which I'm happy to share a little bit more about after Eddy introduces himself as well.
Awesome. Eddy, over to you.
Awesome. Once again, got to repeat, thank you so much for having us. Like you said, being a co-founder of the organization, it's really, it's awesome to be able to work with y'all every day and just see like the incredible work that you do throughout the state. And Move is really where it started for me. I was born in Mexico, raised in San Antonio. And so I consider myself a Tex-Mexican and still have a lot of love for the state. Definitely, hopefully want to end up back there one day. But I think, very similarly to Clarissa, I kind of came into it through campus life as well. When I was a student at the University of Texas at San Antonio, there was just a lot of different issues going on campus that sort of like were getting students like riled up, wanting to pay a little attention to. And you could tell that there was sort of this like energy bubbling for like a sense of like, organization, right? Like a sense of power. And we knew that like, just within the campus of like UTSA, like if we were able to sort of, get all these students together and voting actively, we would be able to have a say in like local city politics and really shape, the future of the city for the benefit of those who still have, decades left to enjoy it. And so I was actually through an internship at the Democratic Party that I realized that like, sometimes parties and other campaigns and whatnot aren't really prioritizing youth outreach, and so me and a few friends got together and really tried to make this a thing, like an organization that specifically worked for young people, to get them involved and to get them to help them recognize like the power that they had and everything. And so Really, really lucky to be able to still be on that path and now get to do that on a national scale. And, you know, as a newer member of the SLSV coalition.
Awesome. And if you're joining us live on Facebook right now, you can make sure that you comment your questions and we'll be happy to ask them to our guest today, or you can tweet them to us at move_Texas. Clarissa, do you want to talk a little bit about generally what the Students Learn, Students Vote Coalition is?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had mentioned that I previously had worked at the Dole Institute of Politics at the University of Kansas. And while I was there, one of the things that we were tasked for doing with the university was making sure that the University of Kansas complied with a provision in the Higher Education Act that requires colleges and universities to provide voter registration for their students. What that at the time amounted to was having just a table out on the quad for a couple of weeks and then really calling it good. As I left the Dole Institute, I came to an organization called Young Invincibles, which is also a national nonprofit that works to help elevate the voices of young people in the political process. And while there, this topic of conversation about this Higher Education Act requirement kept coming up again with other groups. And we really wanted to come together to find a way to either, one, make sure that campuses knew that this is something that they should be doing, or help to ensure that the Department of Education would actually enforce it. Because what we saw when we looked not just at the institution that I was working at, but more nationally, was that a lot of campuses weren't even complying with this. So as these groups came together, we knew we had to have some sort of a viewpoint on like, what could we do to either, one, make that provision stronger and ensure that more campuses were actually abiding by that provision, or what could we do in order to help campuses and support them in doing this work beyond just voter registration to voter engagement, voter education, voter turnout. And so in February of 2016, a number of groups came together and we started the Students Learn, Students Vote Coalition, which is now the largest national network in the country that's focused on increasing college student voting. We have over 400 nonpartisan groups that operate in the
coalition. So many. And through those groups, we have a reach of about 1,700 college campuses that we work with all around the country. So it's grown a lot in a very short amount of time. And it's been really exciting. Yeah, and it's incredible work. And it's bringing to mind, we have similar like state legislation that requires high schools to have voter registration that is similarly not enforced. So it's interesting to kind of see how those are paralleling, because I feel like we got there nationally several years ago, and I think Texas is kind of just getting there on the high school level, which is a total tangent of things that my mind is thinking about. But I'd love to get y'all's just thoughts on what kind of trends we're seeing in student voting across the country. We know in Texas, we saw a large increase in the last midterm. We saw great turnout on Super Tuesday in our primary. But what are we seeing as far as the youth movement and voting nationally? Eddy, if you want to kick us off, you want to hit it.
Yeah, definitely happy to. I mean, what I've been saying for a while now, and I still very firmly believe this, is that like 2020 is going to be a historic year for youth turnout. Like everything that we're seeing from the last couple of years is pointing in this direction, right? It's still going to take work, and given obvious complications, maybe a little bit more work. But, you know, 2018, like you said, we saw the highest youth turnout, I think, since the 80s in the US in general. 2019, you know, NVRD had its most successful off-year NVRD, National Voter Registration Day, since its inception. And we know a lot of that work is driven by young people, for young people, stealing y'all's. But and we knew that there was going to be a lot more people turning 18 this year and becoming eligible to vote. And so we saw these trends. We saw excitement from groups like MOVE around the US that were working to organize their community, get students involved, and make it easier for young people to make their voice heard. And you know, we're still fully expecting that, right? We definitely still saw those trends going into the primary season, and through, you know, campus closures, COVID quarantine, you know, all the barriers that we're facing now that we weren't expecting. You know, we're still seeing young people come up with really creative ideas to keep their peers engaged, and to, you know, make sure people are, you know, ready to vote in November.
Clarissa, do you want to build on that, Eddy?
Yeah, just to add to that, like Eddy said, we've seen really great increases in college student turnout over the last couple of years. Just to sort of baseline that a little bit, in 2014, which is the election that was previously just directly before when we started the coalition, or the federal election that was anyway. There are elections every year, as we all know. In 2014, college student turnout was at 19%, so less than 1 in 5 college students turned out to vote in that election. And we saw, as Eddy mentioned, historic increases in turnout from 2014 to the next comparable election, the 2018 midterm election, over 20% percentage points higher. So 40% of college students turned out to vote in the 2018 election, which was not far off, quite frankly, from the turnout that we saw in the 2016 presidential election, which was at 48%. So, you know, we know that voting is habit forming, and as college students vote once, we hope that they will vote again in the future. And with that huge increase that we saw over the last midterm elections, we really do think there's going to be a pretty big increase, or at least a lot of interest going into the election this year. And it's on all of us to really make sure that students still have all the resources and tools that they need to follow through and cast their ballots.
Yeah. And Clarissa, I want you to build a little bit upon, I think one of the really interesting things about SLSV that is unique to kind of this space is that you work directly with institutions. Can you talk a little bit about why that's so important in building up those relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, as everything sort of started happening with the coronavirus and the quarantine, and as we saw, gosh, has it been 2 months? Month and a half now already? What is time?
Time is a flat circle.
I don't know.
It's been no time.
However long, when it happened, when college students started being sent home for the rest of the semester, and as we're all trying to figure out what is going to happen on colleges this fall, we really saw that having campus administrators and faculty members engaged in this work is more important now than ever.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, colleges and universities have lots of different ways that they interact with students on a regular basis, right? Just think of campus orientations, or every single student on a campus has to register for their classes every semester. They're in classrooms, whether they are digital or virtual, right? There's lots of different touch points. And on top of that, right, it's a federal law that colleges and universities provide voter registration. It's a good piece of civic education. And so again, we really saw this huge opening that we should be working with colleges and universities to engage students as voters, not just operating on college campuses and utilizing those different systems and processes that they have. So again, sort of coming back to where I started and where we see ourselves now is that regardless of whether students are on campus on the fall or not, they're still going to be deeply digitally connected to their institutions. And they also see their institutions as sources of trusted information. So the more that we can provide and help support campuses and engaging their students as voters, the better off we're all going to be, and our democracy is going to be.
Yeah. I think that trusted source of information piece is so critical, because we know many young people are first-time voters. You don't necessarily know how to navigate the election system, and you're going to go to the people you go to for everything else. And so I think universities can play a great role there. Eddy, I want to dive in a little bit to some of the programs that y'all are working on. I know that you have the Ask Every Student initiative, which I think is great. Can you tell me a little bit about that project and how you've seen it working out so far?
Yeah, definitely. I'm actually gonna have to kick this question over to Clarissa, who is a lot more familiar with the program at its inception, and was already kind of alluding to it from her last answer.
Yeah, I'm happy to pick up on this one. So Ask Every Student is a program that is built around specifically what it sounds like. It is built around asking every student if they would like to register to vote and integrating that into the different processes that campuses have at their disposal. So this program honestly has been in the works for about a year and a half, and we're just at the point where we're really kicking it off in a big way. I want to give a nod to some of the other organizations that are involved in that program, the Campus Vote Project, the All-In Campus Democracy Challenge, and NASPA. And the Harvard Institute of Politics with their National Campaign Conference also helped really to kick this off and help us sort of dive deep into some of the campuses that were doing a lot of good work on this already. What we've seen over the last couple of years as we've been working really closely with campuses and looking very intently at their voter registration and voter turnout rates through the National Study of Learning, Voting, and Engagement is that there are a few campuses that have really high student registration rates. So we're talking like over 90% of their eligible students are registered to vote. So Northwestern University being one of them, Stony Brook University being one of them, the Maryland Institute College of Art being one of them. So we wanted to figure out what these institutions were doing that was working so well. So what we found is that these institutions were integrating voter registration ask into different processes, like I mentioned, orientation, class registration, but not just integrating it in a way that they, like put a piece of paper in a folder and say, oh, we did this. They were prioritizing having conversations with students and so that they get that very individualized focus. So a 3 to 5 minute conversation with them about making sure that they have all their questions answered, that they fill out their forms correctly, which in regular organizing, right, we know that that works really well. So this is really just sort of translating what we know in that space to the higher ed space.
That's great. That's great. And I think it'll be interesting to see how once this coalition is now formed, like how we can expand those best practices. So I'm excited to see about that. We have a good question from the Facebook comments here from Kristen, who asked, what are some of the ways that students can empower their fellow classmates to organize around important issues? I think both of y'all come from organizing spaces. What advice do you have for people that want to organize their peers?
Yeah, Eddie, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can definitely start this off. I think one of the things that like is really, really important, especially for young organizers, is to it's kind of like finding this like sort of balance of like don't doubt yourself. Like I think this stops so many people from like even voting, right? Like I've talked to so many people who just thought, I don't know enough to vote, right? Like I just don't know anything about the candidates. I don't know anything about the issues. And I think sometimes that fear is obviously magnified when you're talking about like trying to mobilize like your classmates or your entire campus around a specific issue, right? But like if you feel something, right? If something sort of bubbling and you sense something that's not right, like there's something that's there, right? And so I would say like, don't doubt yourself, have confidence in it. Like, we're really your perspective, your experiences and everything that you've sort of like have in your life, like come up with, like it's going to add something of like big value to whatever that issue is, right? And so I definitely think that it's important for people to keep that in mind, but also I would say like seek help. I think the best partnerships are definitely built from people who like we definitely like advocate for people to build coalitions with different perspectives. So like work with campus administrators, work with students, work with community groups, and help bring as much like diverse experiences and perspectives to the table as you can.
I think that's great advice. Great advice. Another great question here from the Facebook comments from Erica. Are there any resources where people can see the voter registration stats for campuses in Texas, or just information about who's getting involved on campus?
Yeah, that's great. Eddie, feel free to jump in here. My first thought goes to, again, these national study of learning, voting, and engagement reports that I mentioned. The best way to find those, because campuses don't necessarily have to make those public, even though there are over 1,100 campuses that participate in this, is to go to the All-In Campus Democracy Challenge website, allinchallenge.org. There you can search by state, you can search by specific campus, and if those campuses have made those public, you can see what the specific registration and turnout rates are for those specific campuses. These are really cool because they're actually objective measures that are matched by student records with the voter file. And then it also breaks it down to a lot of really helpful demographics. So you can even like dive into how many of the math majors at UT Austin are voting, which is really cool. Also, if helpful, we do have I believe we have a state level report for Texas as well that we could share.
Yeah, that Insolve data is super interesting to play around in, because you can look at it across major and things like that, and then really start targeting your outreach, which anyone can do on their own campuses, which is really exciting. And thanks, Kristen, for linking that in there. Such helpful viewers. You love to see it. Let's go. You have some other great programs that I want to make sure that we highlight before we run out of time today. Here in Texas, we know a lot about the campus polling closure problem, or the polling place closure problem across the state. The vast majority of the locations that have closed in the country have been in Texas. Can you tell me a little bit about the program with MTV, the Plus One the Polls program, that's trying to combat that problem?
Yeah, I can take this one. So I came in a little after the program had already been sort of like created and started, but I did come in kind of in like around the first month of like really trying to build it up. But from my understanding, Texas actually may have been a prime motivation, if not the prime motivation for starting up Plus One the Polls.
Happy to help.
Texas always making its way onto the national stage. And where this really came from was, MTV runs a program where they actually help support a lot of young leaders throughout the nation that are doing like really awesome work in their communities to help their peers, get engaged. And one of these people was Maya Patel, who is currently working with the Campus Vote Project. But I also know that Raven was one of these as well from Move Texas. And so all this to say, these are folks that are working in their community to try to, get their peers involved, get students involved and active in the process. And they realized that there was sort of this immense barrier in the state, especially in Texas, where students, you could do all this work to get them registered, which is a lot of work in a state like Texas. And you can get them educated, you can get them excited. But at the end of the day, like if there's not a close polling place, or if the polling place on campus has way too long of a line, right, it's going to deter a couple people from voting. Yeah. And so, everything that I mentioned earlier, right, like all these numbers we've seen over the last few years, we've seen great national voter registration efforts. We've seen great efforts to educate voters, and we know that that's going to keep happening. But we wanted to make sure that there was something else there to make sure that once there's all these new registered voters, it was actually easy for them to participate. A recent Circle study actually showed that young voters who had not participated in their last election, around half of them actually reported that the primary reason they didn't do it was because of lack of access. Mm-hmm. And it's not surprising to hear that when you also hear that since 2013, more than 1,600 polling locations have closed down in the US, right? Much more than 1,600. Yeah. And so, we're wanting to fight that, starting up Plus One the Polls as a national effort to create new polling places on college campuses, as well as, keep the ones that are there, for pushing back on any sort of like fight back that they might be seeing. And so we talked to organizers, like Maya, like Raven, who have, taken this on in their own communities, sort of got some best practices together, built an online toolkit, are hosting webinars, have office hours available, and also have funding available in case a student leader, campus administrator, a community organizer, is finding that like this lack of funding is an issue with them being able to secure their polling place. And so, we wanted to make it as easy as possible for these local leaders to be advocating for their own polling place, and kind of help compile that for folks.
Yeah. And we'll drop more information about that program in the comments as well. Really amazing effort that MTV is doing, and they're like really long commitment to civic engagement. And then we can talk about my favorite holiday, National Voter Registration Day, the only holiday that matters, fight me. But along with the Alliance for Youth Action, y'all run the Campus Takeover program for National Voter Registration Day. Can you tell me a little bit more about that program and how people can get involved in National Voter Registration Day on their own community?
I just want to say civic holidays are the best holidays, but this is also a
Yeah.
program that Eddy heads up. So I'm going to let him take this one too.
Yeah, I'm like, it can be a gift-giving holiday if you want it to be. That's what I
Yeah,
think.
the gift of being registered
Yeah,
and getting to participate in our democracy. What's better
exactly.
gift than that,
Exactly.
Charlie?
Charlie, there might be some competition this year though for your favorite civic holiday. I mean, NVRD is incredible, historical, everything, but you know, there's some new stuff coming up this year. You know,
Are
we're
we
gonna see
talking
vote early
vote
day.
early day? Like, I'm ready for it. I'm ready
It's
for it.
like how am I supposed to choose between my favorite? Like,
Yeah,
you know, it's like you can't choose your favorite child. Like, not that.
you definitely can.
The
Okay.
good news is you don't have to choose though. You can do them all. You can participate in all of them. There are many democratic gifts to go around.
But I will, you know, talk a little bit about the first one that we'll see this year, which is National Voter Registration Day. And so, yeah, as Charlie was saying, you know, we help run the Campus Takeover program with the Alliance for Youth Action, Alliance for Youth Organizing. And essentially what this is that like we are helping people, whether they're, you know, community, you know, nonprofits, campus leaders, campus groups, campus administrators, whoever it may be, if they're hosting an NVRD event on campus, on a college campus somewhere in the US, they can sign up for Campus Takeover to get access to like resources, additional support, webinars, and once again, funding in order to help make their NVRD event the most successful it can be. In 2019, we had more than 500 campuses nationwide celebrate NVRD. And so, you know, we definitely want to help expand that work. We want to make sure that all of these events that they're doing are like the most successful they can be. And like I said, you know, we have funding to help with that.
The best part. That's the gift, is the funding. And self-plug, we do run the largest National Voter Registration Day program in the country at Move Texas. Come for our crown. You best not miss. So we're looking.
Those folks in Minnesota at Lead 'Em In come for you every year.
They're trying and it's not working for them.
How many years is that now? Is this like three-peat or something?
I think it's 3 or 4. Someone correct me in the comments. I'm gonna say it's more. We're getting to our last few questions here, but I did want to make sure that we opened up space to talk about the census. Census Day already happened, but that was not the last day to take the census. We still have lots of time, many more months to do the census, but why wait? My2020census.gov. Clarissa, do you want to tell us a little bit about why it's so important for students to take the census and any resources that y'all might have about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the importance of the census can really be boiled down to 2 things: money and power. Billions of dollars are allocated every year for 10 years at a time based on census numbers, which count how many people are physically living in different places around the country. And power. So congressional representation is also determined. How many representatives from Congress folks get is based on census numbers as well. And then lines are drawn to reapportion different congressional districts based on the census numbers. So a lot is at stake, especially for young people, because this is something that we'll live the effects of for the next 10 years. So it's really, really important that everyone fills out the census. For college students, man, it's a little confusing.
Yeah.
Because folks are supposed to fill out the census as to where they were living on April 1st, which again was in the midst of when many students started leaving their campuses for the semester and going back home. And if you were living on the dorms, there's a chance that your campus may have counted you in their on-campus enumerations, but it's hard to say. So everyone should just go ahead and fill out the census. You probably got a cool little envelope sent to you with a special code, but even if you don't have that code, you can still go on and fill it out.
Yeah.
Help me out here, Charlie. What's the
My2020census.gov.
There you go.
We got it there for you, and we've linked SLSV's coalition, their page about the census in the comments so you can find more information. We also have movetexas.org/census, which has frequently asked questions. And now that leads our last question, which is my favorite question every time. We give out recommendations about what we're watching and what we're reading in quarantine life. Eddy, if you want to start, any recommendations for people while they're stuck at home?
Oof, y'all, I watch a lot of random stuff, but honestly, I'm so behind on TV. Like I literally just started watching Breaking Bad. Like I'm really rough on it. What I do listen to more so like new stuff though is some music. And I do that a lot. And so if y'all haven't, been listening to, there's been a lot of really great music that's been coming out since quarantine, started up, right? A lot of great music that's going to be great to dance to once we get out of it. If
Why do we
not,
have to wait, Eddy?
if not in your living rooms right now.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Club quarantine.
God, it's so good. Like if we got some Bad Bunny, we got some J Balvin, we got some Weekend. We have a lot.
Like, release your playlist. Clarissa, what culture are you consuming? What are we recommending to the people?
So I want to recommend something, and then I'm going to do a plug, if that's okay as well.
Yes, always.
So I'm currently rewatching Veep,
Nice.
which I'm loving every minute of, and also
a little too close to reality, but okay.
Too close, but it's great. And also I just started watching True Detective, which I'm very excited about. But also one of the things that we have through the coalition is a book club where we often do read books or listen to podcasts or watch movies together, and then come together and discuss them, and often have the authors or the producers of the podcast and the documentaries come and join us for a discussion. So also would love to have anyone join us. It's an open invitation if anyone is interested to join the
Great group.
Book Club.
It's a great group. And if I was better at reading, I would make the meetings more fun. I am technically a member of this book club, and I'm bad at reading. We'll work on it. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. So thankful that we're partners in this work and that we get to do this together and that we get to talk all the time. So thank you guys so much. Thank you everyone that's joining us live. And thank you for your comments. We'll be back soon with another Move University. Stay safe, wash your hands, make good choices.